euthanasia. What does it mean? Let's see a definition. There we are. Literally, eu means good, and thanas, or thanatos, means death, so euthanasia is good death. I was say, really? Death is almost always an enemy. Sometimes it can be a relief, but people talk about, but I've got a right to die. I just thought really helpful to analyse what that means, because a lot of people are like, well, of course I've got a right to die if I want to. Well, in some circumstances, maybe, but when people are talking about euthanasia, it's those bottom two that they're generally thinking about. The top three, well, certainly the top two are quite legal. So, for example, a right to die, to refuse futile life-sustaining treatment, that's often recognised as responsible medical care. If a patient is not responding to their medication, they're terminally ill, there's no way you can improve their condition, and they're saying, please just stop. I don't want any more of the medication. That's good use of resources, and you're recognising this patient has also seen, you know, this is the end of the road. I've just got to face the music. Second thing, it's also quite legal, is to say, do you know what? I know that this cancer treatment would save my life, but I don't want it. I just want to meet my maker when my time is up. You're quite entitled to say, look, enough's enough. I've had this treatment, I've had that treatment. I know this potential thing could save my life, but I don't want it, thank you. For all kinds of reasons, people might legally say, I don't want that treatment. Well, sometimes people think the right to die is the right to kill yourself, but actually even planning to kill yourself is cause for being sanctioned under the Mental Health Act. It's actually a sign that somebody needs a great deal of psychological help if they're in that situation. It's not exactly a right, it's more an indication that things are badly wrong. But the last two are even worse than that. To get help in committing suicide is called physician-assisted suicide. That's illegal at the moment, thank God, because as soon as you start asking doctors, oh, can you make that a treatment option, all of a sudden you're asking the doctor no longer to just preserve and protect and heal life. Now you're asking to act as an executioner as well. That's a dreadful role that most doctors would heartily refuse. The last thing is the right to be killed at your request by an act or by an omission. So it used to be the case that people just thought about, you know, by the act of giving a lethal dose and a lethal injection. But they are recognising also these days it might be by an omission of some vital, like, for example, removing food or water. Thankfully, that is currently illegal. That's euthanasia in its absolute terms. Good evening. Now, people often couch all of this, particularly those last two, in very friendly terms, like dying with dignity, or assisted dying, or mercy killing. But actually, it has a dreadful effect wherever it's been brought about. So it's currently legal. So this is physician-assisted suicide and euthanasia proper are legal in Canada, Belgium, Netherlands, Australia also, as well as various states in the USA, like Oregon, for example. And lots of statistics have been brought out from those sad situations where it's been legalized. We'll think about some of the statistics later. But here's some arguments that people bring out to support it. One, we must remain in control. I want my autonomy. And if I don't want to live, then you should be able to kill me. We'll think about that in a moment. Why people are scared of that is because this is statistically the main reason. People don't want to feel dependent. They don't want to have the indignity of having someone else wash them or toilet them. They don't want the indignity of losing their faculties, of getting old and losing their marbles. They just don't want to face it. We'll think about that in a minute. What about is the best way out of pain? That's another argument that people might use to say, look, we need this. It's the most humane thing to do, to put someone out of their misery. We would do it to a horse on the battlefield, or we do it to dogs when, you know, they're terminally ill. So why not do it to people? And it's important to recognize we're not just talking about physical pain here. There's lots of other kinds of pain that come to people, particularly towards the end of life. There's relational pain of seeing those around you crying, weeping over your situation. You longing perhaps to be reconciled to someone, and that's not really possible now you're in a bad state. Or you recognize you've lived your life away from God. There's a spiritual pain you may feel at the end of life, that it's become quite futile, and death now is accelerating towards you, and you realize you haven't lived life as you wished. Or a third reason people might use to support euthanasia, and that is its good economy. We can't afford not to bring this into the statute book. People would cite, it's getting more and more expensive to care for people who are disabled or who are terminally ill. It's best just to kill some of them off so as to save money to use on other people who are still worth it. Implicitly then, if you have some of those other conditions, your life is no longer worth living. Talk about that in just a moment. The thing to add to this is sometimes people say, look, there's an added bonus. Because as somebody's going towards death, they may experience multiple organ failure. And then when they finally do die, their organs are useless to anybody else. But if you kill them off early, then their organs are useful to be donated. Have a chat about some of those arguments right now. What do you think? What struck you as outrageous? Why? Great. Any quick thoughts of inspiration from that? I can relay them onto the recording. I'm veering away from the lollipop of doom because it tends to put people off of giving answers. Any quick answers and thoughts? No, when I say I'm veering away from it, I mean we're not using the lollipop. So just put your hand up and I'll pick you. You want?
It's
Yeah.
it's a good economy thing where you could use their organs for. If they're given a lethal injection, then you couldn't use their organs because they contain the lethal injection in them.
Yes. I think if you wanted to use somebody's, this is really thinking about people in a very economic way, isn't it? As though they're just useful for organs. But if you were to go down that route, then you would need to think very carefully about how you kill them, because potentially by lethal injection, maybe some of those organs would be filled with that lethal toxin. You don't want to donate organs like that. No, quite.
Can you flip back to the other slide?
The previous one? Previous slide? Yeah.
C.
So C,
Yeah.
suicide itself
Yeah.
is different from euthanasia.
Yes. But it's not okay.
No, it's not okay. It's not illegal in the UK,
It's not illegal.
but
No, that's not okay. We're just clarifying.
it is, yeah, it's not illegal. Yeah, you're not going to be prosecuted, but you are going to be cared for very, very, very carefully, because yes, exactly.
The clarity was that it's not illegal. Not
Exactly. Goodness me. No, I'm not suggesting it's all right to kill yourself. I think you need help if that's the case. Yeah. Okay, Steph.
I'm just going to say, it feels a bit like we're sort of brainwashed at the moment to be thinking that this is the right way about going about it, and that if you were in a position of being kind of in pain or towards the end of your life, it is like you're brainwashed into thinking that those arguments are used kind of against you.
Yeah, I'll just relay that for the recording, that message seems to be all around at the moment. These messages are all around, such that we feel like we're immersed in these messages, brainwashed almost, such that if we were towards the end of life, then we would feel duty-bound to ask for euthanasia. And we'll think a bit more about that in a while, because it gets worse. If it's legalized, then what you think is a loud message at the moment gets very, very loud. Yeah, C is absolutely heartless, but A and B, you can feel sympathy with people in those situations. Yeah. Here's some of the thoughts that John Wyatt has in his book, Matters of Life and Death, where we got the name for the series. Wanting to die doesn't make it right. We have no right to kill ourselves. We have no right to ask for someone else to kill us. We have higher status, higher rights than any animal. So killing an animal can be a noble thing to do, to put it out of its pain, but we don't have the right to do that with human beings. We'll think more about that in a while. So it's right to stop someone from committing suicide, even if they seem to have, lost their marbles, lost some of their faculties. Nonetheless, the image of God remains, and it's important to sustain them and help them to continue living. And I must remain in control. I don't want the indignity of being dependent on someone else. That's pride in another form, really. Wanting never to be dependent is a pride that needs challenging. And often God humbles people towards the end of their lives as they lose the ability to be resolutely independent from other people. And that's a healthy thing. So it's hard to argue that way, but at least if we have it clear in our minds that independence is not the highest virtue, to actually get more dependent towards the end of your life is nothing to be ashamed of. We're meant to be interdependent. We came into the world utterly dependent, and it's okay to leave the world utterly dependent. It's not undignified. The best way out of pain, that argument doesn't quite hold water, because particularly in the UK, where we've got a Christian heritage, we have developed some really great palliative care. Palliative care is the care for people who are terminally ill. We can't cure them anymore, but what we can do is make them more comfortable in lots of different ways. Nurses and doctors can really help people in dire pain. In 95% of cases, they can manage the pain so that it's nearly gone. Morphine is one of those classic opioids. It's an opioid, isn't it? That has a massive impact. And obviously, long term, it may cause an addiction, but you're not really worried about that if you've only got 6 months left to live. If it gives effective pain relief and makes those last 6 months really bearable, fantastic. So it's not actually the best way out of pain to kill somebody. They just need good care. And what about those other aspects of pain? Remember I mentioned relational pain, of seeing those around you sad. Well, that's okay. It's part of the grieving process. It's good to spend time with people who care for you. That the end of life is an opportunity to deepen your family bonds, to be reconciled with people, and actually to be reconciled to the most important person. If we just kill people off before they've got a chance to really think about their spiritual life, we're doing them a disservice. And the last thing, we can't afford not to. It's a good economy. Well, it's clearly heartless, isn't it? And actually, this whole attitude of thinking, well, once people have gone beyond a certain point, their life isn't worth living, and now they're more valuable as organ donations, and that kind of mindset is horrendous. And legally, at the moment, there's no place for that category of life not worth living, thank God, thanks to our Christian heritage. But once you open that category of a life not worth living, then it leaves open a very wide door for saying, hang about, maybe there's other categories of people out there whose lives are not worth living. And some of the worst totalitarian states in the world categorize perfectly healthy people in that category. Your life is not worth living because you're retarded. Your life is not worth living because you're a communist. Your life is not worth living because you're a Jew. That's what happened 80 years ago, Nazi Germany. So the category of my life isn't worth living, that doesn't exist in the Bible with good reason, because we're made in the image of God. We're very precious to him, and our lives are always worth living. So rather than thinking, we need to save money in the NHS by killing people off, instead we should invest more heavily into palliative care, caring well for people. It doesn't grab the headlines like a new cancer drug is on the way, but it's a very honourable way to give people a dignified, well-medicated, well-cared-for end of life. Here's some more arguments against euthanasia. Luke 10:27, love your neighbour as yourself. And then Jesus is asked by someone, and who is my neighbour? And he gives the example of the Good Samaritan. You remember that this guy is beaten up, left for dead, dying on the side of the road. I wonder if his life is worth living. Well, sadly, two very religious people don't think it's even worth getting involved. But the Good Samaritan, this guy's likely enemy, decides to really heavily invest. He goes out of his way, cancels all his plans, bandages this guy up, loads him up on his own donkey, takes him to the nearest inn and pays for his care for the next 2 days until he's well enough. What he does not do is take his spear and finish the guy off because, well, it's better to put him out of his misery. No, he loves his neighbor as himself, even an enemy. That surely should be our aim with the sick and the dying, the disabled. Apart from that, goodness, Genesis 9 verse 6 is very clear. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. There's a death penalty for murder. For, here's the reason, for in the image of God has God made man. Human life isn't just a gift of God's grace, it's a reflection of his person. So it is very noble to be a human being. It's glorious. You reflect the image of God. You show to all the rest of creation something of what God is like. That makes you infinitely precious. Even if you should lose some of your faculties, even if you've only got a few months left to live, and even if you're in great pain, you're still in the image of God. So value someone not for what they can do, but for who they represent. And Exodus 20, verse 13, you shall not murder. Really, this whole series of Forum at Fives has been an application of that. You shall not murder? Well, who shall I not murder? We've been trying to answer that in different ways. Does God give exceptions, though? Can I murder someone if they're on their way out, if they haven't got long left? Can I murder someone if they're in agony? Or can I murder someone if they really want death, if they're suicidal? Is that merciful? Well, time for a Bible study. We've got somebody in 2 Samuel chapter 1 in exactly that situation. It's the scenario that's presented to us. And I'll read the passage to you, and you can think about those 3 questions in your groups. 2 Samuel chapter 1. You'll find it in the church Bibles on page 304. Now, this comes just after the death of King Saul and his son Jonathan. King Saul actually died on the battlefield. He took his own sword and fell on it. So King Saul has sadly decided to commit suicide on the battlefield. He's gone. Now the new king is David. 2 Samuel chapter 1. After the death of Saul, David returned from striking down the Amalekites and stayed in Ziklag 2 days. On the 3rd day, a man arrived from Saul's camp with his clothes torn and dust on his head. When he came to David, he fell to the ground to pay him honor. Where have you come from? David asked him. He answered, I've escaped from the Israelite camp. What happened? David asked. Tell me. The men fled from the battle, he replied. Many of them fell and died, and Saul and his son Jonathan are dead. I think you'll be glad to hear that. And then David said to the young man who brought him the report, how do you know that Saul and his son Jonathan are dead? Well, I happened to be on Mount Gilboa, the young man said, and there was Saul, leaning on his spear with the chariots and their drivers in hot pursuit. When he turned round and saw me, he called out to me, and I said, what can I do? And he asked me, who are you? An Amalekite, I answered. And then he said to me, stand here by me and kill me. I'm in the throes of death, but I'm still alive. So I stood beside him and killed him, because I knew that after he'd fallen, he could not survive. And I took the crown that was on his head and the band on his arm and have brought them here to my Lord. I think he's expecting some kind of reward here. And then David and all the men with him took hold of their clothes and tore them. They mourned and wept and fasted till evening for Saul and his son Jonathan, and for the army of the Lord and for the nation of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. David said to the young man who brought him the report, where are you from? Well, I'm the son of a foreigner, an Amalekite, he answered. David asked him, why weren't you afraid to lift your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed? And then David called one of his men and said, go strike him down. And he struck him down and he died. So David had said to him, your blood be on your own head. Your own mouth testified against you when you said, I killed the Lord's anointed. So hopefully you followed that. 3 questions. What mercy killing does the Amalekite claim to have carried out? Hopefully that's pretty obvious. Secondly, how desperate did he say King Saul's condition was? Thirdly, what's David's verdict on this action? A couple of minutes. something or omit to do something in order to positively cause their death. What's David's verdict here? Yes or no? Is it all right? No, definitely not. Even though it was to David's own benefit that King Saul is dead. Now he's king. He's finally got the throne that he's longed for, that he knew God had destined him for, even though it happened in the midst of battle. David still thinks it's wrong. Now, is it particularly bad because he dared to lay his hand on the Lord's anointed? Well, based on what we read above, in the image of God as God made man, that's the reason why in the Old Testament murder is taken so seriously. Regardless of your rank or status, your age or ability, every one of us is precious in God's sight. And killing a human being is not something we're entitled to do. So this Amalekite has forfeited his own life. A very serious offense. Further arguments against euthanasia. Firstly, we make some people feel obliged to die. Very often the most vulnerable people. It's that thing of, as you're nearing the end of your life, you feel obliged to no longer be a burden. That is a dreadful thing to impose on the most vulnerable, isn't it? It effectively means society saying to them, we're not going to show you extra compassion. No, we're going to regard you as a burden. No longer a valuable member of society, one that we're particularly care for, rather a duty, something that we'd rather not do. And sadly, in many countries like the Netherlands or in Canada, the permission to die at the end of life becomes a duty to die, so as not to be a drain on resources. And some people agree to be killed, even though they would have preferred to live, but they've now classed themselves as a burden on society. It's a dreadful thing to make euthanasia legal. It makes people feel obliged to die. We also widen the path to involuntary euthanasia. Now, there are three main criteria that we've been thinking about that you've surely got to have together. Someone who's dying, someone who's suffering, someone who's asking to die, requesting it. But any one of those can so easily be made optional. Like, for example, you've got someone who's dying and suffering, but maybe they're too young to really know what they're asking for. Maybe they're a bit demented. Their mind is not in fit state to know what to ask for. And what you sometimes find then is doctors will make the decision for you. So in the Netherlands, this is from data way back in the 90s, a study found that more than 1,000 cases of euthanasia had no explicit request, and an additional 4,940 cases where physicians administered lethal morphine overdoses without the patient's explicit consent. Now, there's about 6,000 people who hadn't said, please kill me. Even where euthanasia is legal, they hadn't asked for death, and yet the doctors gave it to them anyway. And that is out of a total of 130,000 people who died in 1990. So that year, 4.6% of all Dutch deaths were without consent. People effectively murdered in a hospital because it had become a grey area. So much for choice, for autonomy. The rules so easily get bent. Once you open this door, it gets cranked open by all kinds of pressures. Another thing to say is some people have lived fulfilled lives despite their diagnosis. And many elderly people live happily despite their dementia, despite their incapacity and the indignity of growing old. Actually, they're quite content because there are people around them who love them. They can share memories. They can sing together. They can talk to the Lord. And a few people who seemed terminally ill or who had life-threatening injuries nonetheless recovered. So a classic state is the persistent vegetative state. It's where you've basically got someone in a coma, but with their eyes open. They've no way of communicating, it seems, with the people around them. What is the point of letting these people drift on, basically not enjoying life, not able to communicate with their loved ones? Well, there was a study done some years ago where you put some of these patients in an MRI scanner, brain scanner, and you speak to them and you say, can you imagine yourself playing tennis? And then you scan their brain and see what happens. And then you say, can you imagine just walking around your house? And you scan their brain again. And what you find is bits of their brain are lighting up exactly as if they were healthy. They are imagining, they can hear, they just can't communicate. And eventually, a quarter of those in a persistent vegetative state do eventually wake up, statistically. So doctors sometimes get it wrong, even in that extreme example. And sometimes people are given 6 months left to live. Yeah, some of them might only live 1 month, but some of them might live another 6 years. It's very, very hard to predict how long someone will live. Maybe we should try a lot harder to give people a good death rather than hasten their death. So some distinctions we've got to keep making. We've already kind of touched on these. Letting someone die is very different to making them die. Killing is actively causing or speeding up someone's death. That is murder. And yet some people, they take letting die as basically the same category. Oh, if you're doing that, well, you may as well legalize killing. No, no, no. Passively allowing someone to die from other causes, from their disease, that's okay. If recovery is likely, if we can help, we should, but if no treatment is going to be effective, or if they're basically in a burning car and there's no way we can get near them to rescue them, it's actually a responsible thing to let them die. Some examples of where that's okay. If someone's potentially going to be put on a life support machine, an artificial respirator, but you know from their brainstem activity, they've died already. The brain's gone. There's no activity there whatsoever. Then why not just allow their body to die? If they're on life support and their family have had plenty of time to say their goodbyes, and actually there are other patients who really could do with this life support system and who may have a better chance of recovery, maybe turning off the life support machine, that intervention that's the only thing keeping the person alive, maybe that's a humane thing to do. I love the words of Wayne Grudem. He's written about, this possibility. I think it's even an express wish of his that he's written down so that others will know what to do if he's ever in that state. If a circumstance should arise where I'm facing a terminal illness and there's no reasonable human hope of recovery, and I'm no longer conscious, no longer able to make my wishes known, and probably no longer able even to consciously pray, in such a situation, would I want a large amount of effort and expense put forth to keep me from dying and therefore to keep me out of heaven? Certainly not. And Paul, remember Paul the Apostle, faced with the possibility of living or dying. He didn't know what he was about to face. To live is Christ, to die is gain. He either wanted to be useful or to be in glory. And so he was quite prepared to accept his fate if God should choose that his time was up. So very different, though, to choosing, oh, please kill me now. No, that's not what Paul was saying. If the Lord had decided that his time was up, then letting him die was okay. Now, nutrition and hydration, those should always be offered. That's basic care of other human beings. You might do that with a feeding tube if someone's in a coma. James 2, verses 15 and 17 says we should care for our brother and sister if they're in need. Basic food and clothing, that kind of thing, if at all possible. That is ordinary compassion. Unless someone says, no thank you, don't feed me anymore. No thank you, the drink is making me choke. My body's so bad I can't cope with it anymore. Or it's causing bloating because I've got heart failure. So here's a quote from a doctor. Dehydration is humane for those with severe heart failure. It avoids fluid backing up in the lungs or elsewhere in the body, causing excessive swelling. In the dying patient, dehydration, not giving them water, causes discomfort only if the lips and tongue are allowed to dry. So as someone's dying, you can give them a little bit of liquid, but you don't have to force feed them the drink. So that's a helpful distinction to be made. Other than that, though, we have every reason to show this person compassion, to keep giving them nutrition and liquid if they need it. Lastly, some people say, but doctors often give morphine, don't they? And high doses of morphine, they can shorten your life. So what's the problem with giving them the morphine in order to shorten their life with that intention? Well, I want to say it's okay to give pain relief that accidentally, as a secondary thing, hastens death. For the terminally ill, opioids like morphine can vastly improve the quality of life. In high doses, they may shorten life. That is permissible, providing the dose is demanded by the level of pain, not simply because the patient wants to die sooner. Here's the point. The law distinguishes intending to kill from intending to give comfort. The fact that giving comfort sometimes shortens someone's life, that's permissible. Sometimes there are side effects to very good drugs. We have to trust that doctors know what they're doing there. But to intentionally shorten someone's life, and that being the main reason why you're administering the drug, that's not legal. That's not right. Okay. Very, very important we've reached this point. If you've got any questions, now's the point to ask them. But this is a real nub of it. We've got to present a beautiful alternative to assisted suicide. What is a good death? Somebody is in agony, they've got 6 months left to live, they're asking to die. What are we going to say to them? How are we going to care for these people so that they realize they are valuable? So that their remaining months or weeks are actually bearable and positive, something God-given. What would be a good death? Have a chat. thing to ask, isn't it? Well, what is a good death? But perhaps worth thinking about. You've got a question?
No, I said it's a very odd.
Oh, is it? Oh, yeah. An odd question. Well, sometimes we hear of somebody dying in a terrible situation. We might pray, Lord, don't let me go like that. I'm tempted to tell a joke, but this doesn't seem the right evening for it. Ask me later if you're interested.
We talked a bit about treating the individual as a significant individual rather than as a problem.
Treating them as a valued individual rather than as a problem.
Even to the simpler, engaging in conversation about life and that kind of, and what they've learned, lessons, so that they feel valuable rather than simply a consumer. There's more to them than just what they're currently going through.
Brilliant. So asking them of life experiences, any lessons they've learned, so they see that they're not just somebody who's going through pain and difficulty at the time. Obviously, you can sympathize and ask them how it is, but to think more broadly about how life has been, what they've learned so far.
Maybe giving them control, like they might feel like they're losing control, so maybe you could give them control in other ways, like how they want their care to look and what's helpful.
That's so important. Ask them what they want their care to look like. They may be losing control in different ways, so emphasize that they have agency, they have some say in what happens to them, what happens around them. Very, very helpful. Yeah, Gemma.
See a lot of this at work. It's having a conversation early. I see a lot of people who don't talk about it at all, and then you get to a crisis point where they don't have that choice and they don't have that agency and they don't have. So, yeah, getting people at 6 months to think and talk and feel valued and plan is really key.
It's very frustrating when people don't want to talk about this until, well, it's too late, really, and all the decisions are being made around them. Much better to have the conversation 6 months or even more ahead of time.
Get nice documents, write it all down.
And write it all down. Yeah. Oh, yes.
So I was going to say, following on from that, there are practicalities, aren't there?
There are definite practicalities, yeah.
Where people want to die, what medication,
What medication, where they want to die.
what it looks like to be comfortable. So there are some practicalities, which is really what Gemma's talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would make you comfortable? Do you want to die in the hospice? Do you want to return home? Yeah. So it's interesting. I'm doing a funeral on Thursday for a guy who used to be part of the church. He had 6 months left to live about 2 months ago. So when I heard that, I went to the hospital to visit him. Next time I hear from his wife, she says, can you come visit at some point? The doctor's saying he's got about 2 weeks left to live. And he's at home, which was great. That was his choice, to be cared for at home at that stage. So I dash over, I go and see him. And we looked at Psalm 23 together, we prayed together. And one of his last things that he said to his wife was, I love you so much. He was kind of phasing in and out of consciousness, clearly not well. You'd expect that with someone with 2 weeks left to live. As it turned out, he had only about 2 hours left to live. And because his trust was in Jesus, I know he's in glory now. But what a lovely way to go, surrounded by those you love, by family and friends who knew his time was nearly up, and who prepared themselves to say goodbye, and who were praying with him and for him. It was quite touching, a privilege really to be there with him at that time. Here's some other thoughts about a good death. I've said it before, to expect ourselves to be independent throughout our lives, right to the final moment, is just unrealistic. We can't be fully in control. We can't be fully independent right to the end. Let go of that vain hope. That's not going to be part of a good death. We are dependent creatures throughout our lives, and we should embrace that and recognize that's a good part of God's design, that we should live in community and that we should need the gifts and resources that others may bring to us at different times. You definitely expect good quality care with pain relief as needed. You want emotional support. And this is something that's often forgotten. It's not enough just to put somebody away in a hospital with nursing care. The nurses haven't got the time really to provide the emotional support. What you need is chaplaincy staff, Christians who are going to go and visit, a hospice where there's plenty of emotional support, social aspect to what's going on in your end of life, so that you can not be alone. It's one of the greatest wishes people have as they're dying. Don't leave me alone. And spiritual support, very, very important. And this is why Christians have been at the forefront of hospice care for many, many decades. It's because we recognize it's now or never. We've got to care for these people, and this is their moment where they've really got to be reconciled to God. And we care about that more than anything, because it's their eternity at stake. We want them to have no fear as they face death. Luke 2, verse 29 is mentioned there. Do you know who that's talking about? It is a Christmas passage. Simeon, yeah. So in many churches, the nunc dimittis, now you may dismiss. It's the beginning of Simeon's final words to God. Now you may dismiss your servant in peace, for my eyes have seen the Messiah, basically. Simeon is a very old man. He's just met the baby Jesus, and he's overjoyed. And he's like, Lord, you can let me go now. I'm quite happy. I'm delighted. Life has reached as full an experience as I could want. I'm not scared to face what's coming next because I've met the Messiah, and I trust you. And that's the kind of peace that any of us could want as we reach the end. We may not get the opportunity to hold the baby Jesus, but we can know Jesus personally and be at rest. There's lots of other examples. The other day we were reading Stephen being stoned to death. I mean, it was a terrifying experience. While they were stoning him, this is Acts 7:59, Stephen prayed, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. And then he fell on his knees and cried out, Lord, don't hold this sin against them. And when he'd said this, he fell asleep. There's the Bible's euphemism for someone who's no longer in contact with the living, but who lives on and who will rise again in the resurrection. It's that kind of a falling asleep. But there's no terror in that man as he died. Instead, humble prayer, forgiveness for those around him, an astonishing way to go. That's the kind of way I'd like to go. Brilliant. Jesus has delivered us from the fear of death by his own death. He's wonderful. Last little thing to say is do check out these charities, the Evangelical Alliance, the Christian Institute, and CARE, Christian Action, Research and Education is what that stands for. They're currently doing a lot of work trying to make Christians aware of how to pray and how to campaign against euthanasia, because this is really, really very topical. Maybe I should have started with this, but at the moment, the House of Commons has said, yes, we want assisted dying in the UK. We want to be like the Netherlands. We want to be like Canada. And Christians should be thinking, God forbid. No, thank you. Thankfully, in our government, a system of government, things have to pass between the House of Commons and then be checked and debated in the House of Lords, brought back to the House of Commons, and then back and forth several times before it finally becomes law. And at the moment, I think the House of Lords have tabled not just one little amendment, not one little thing they want changed about this proposed law, but 1,000 amendments. The House of Lords are basically saying, no, not like, no. Wonderful. Praise God for Lords with a bit of common sense. And they're debating it at the moment. They were given 4 days to debate this bill, and they've only so far got through 7 of those amendments. I think they might need a bit more time. So lots of key objections have been raised. For example, they've said that the Paralympian Baroness Gray Thompson has described the bill as a direct threat to disabled people. She recognises if this becomes law, then disabled people will feel like a burden and will request to die. Others have said, look, the elderly, women in abusive relationships where they're being coerced and their husbands are saying, just, kill yourself, ask for death. That kind of situation you can imagine coming about. People will be far too easily coerced to die. And people have recognized the poor and especially ethnic minorities already lack resources in end-of-life care. They should have pain relief. They should have palliative care made more available. The Lords are saying, let's invest in caring for the weak, not killing them. Yes. Pray for them. So we're going to spend just a minute or two praying for the vulnerable. So here's some ideas. Give thanks for Christians leading hospice care and care homes. Pray that our society will care for the sick instead of removing them. May the disabled get the support that helps them to live a full life. May women facing abuse have routes of escape. May ethnic minorities trust doctors more so they can access pain relief. May relatives who work hard to care for their sick rely on God and find strength to keep on going. And here's some further suggestions for Lords, MPs, doctors and nurses, and that politicians would seek to do the Lord's will in health and social care. And that Keir Starmer and Wes Streeting, he's the Health and Social Care Secretary, and all our MPs encounter Christ and surrender to his will. We want these guys to be saved as well as to bring about righteous laws. May Christian laws and MPs give bold speeches so that all can see that a dignified death is one that's dependent on others, not this crazy idea that we have to remain totally autonomous and able to stand on our own 2 feet right to the end. And pray also for the health of nurses, doctors, and palliative care specialists who work long hours and pressured situations. It's not glamorous work in palliative care, but God loves it. So, should we spend a bit of time in open prayer? I'll put the first slide up, and then after a couple of minutes, I'll put the second slide up. We should pray about these things, shouldn't we? That's a few of us. Pray.